Since we really can't go anywhere right now, I hung 4 works that I've recently created in my studio. I took some pictures and some video of it so that I can show you guys what I've been working on. I feel like it's got something to say. It's fairly important, fairly nuanced, and I feel like it deserves a little bit of recognition. Honestly, that's what I feel like. But here's what the pieces are about. And if you want to learn more about this, you can Wikipedia it. The NAACP has some lectures that are very interesting. I'd encourage you to check those out because they really are fascinating. So the first work we have, it's Riot. I'm just kind of let you take these in for a few seconds here, kind of get your first impression. You know, some things you may not like when you first look at them, but the longer you study it, the more you take in the different characteristics and replace the symbology with different things. It may grow on you. You may come to like it or appreciate it more in a different way. So just studying the piece without really any opinion and kind of taking in the different parts gives you some place to start in interpreting these pieces. And again, this is just a guideline to maybe getting the most out of them, but it's not important. To appreciate art, you don't have to think about it really. The art critics want to take it to the nth degree and make mountains out of molehills. And that's fine. You know, some people can spend an hour pondering their hand, but other people just see fingers. So it just depends on who you are as an individual, what your level of introspection is, I guess. So the first work I'll talk about in depth is Riot. Riot started out as 3 separate pieces that were made at 3 different times, and they weren't related to one another in any way. And then as I started discovering more about this Mudsill theory, I saw these pieces in my studio and I was like, okay, that will work. That's a word in the sentence that I want to create. And I had a wire figure. I'm like, that's another word in the sentence that I want to make. So I put all of these words together and these works were completely transformed. The canvases that are covered with gesso were just textured abstracts, and they had blue in them and just a little bit to make it pop, but by and large they're kind of aesthetically inert. As soon as I put the wire figure, that kind of broken pose, on that blue, it looks like viscera. Completely transformed this work, and it went from being something that was kind of nondescript, that kind of fits in the background, to being something that has its hand up and it's like, I have something to say. Do you want to hear what I have to say? It's a very commanding piece. And the 2 work together. The one piece is just an extension of the mud in this idea that I have, and you can see how nicely textured it is. The works on their own, I think, were really nice, but adding that figure to it just took it to a whole other level. Coming up with the idea itself took weeks for me to roll this stuff around in my head and kind of think about what does this circumstance say and how is it saying it. So when I created Riot, I definitely had current events in mind. I really like this piece and I hope you do too. Let me know what you think in the comments. So the next one is Out of My Skin. Out of My Skin uses a larger wire figure, heavier gauge wire, much larger than the canvas, so it gives you this really great perspective of this person's just jumping or leaping out of the canvas. The idea that I had when I created this was to have the canvas lay flat and the figure is being supported on the canvas by all these wires. But halfway through, I just thought, what would it look like if I hung it up on the wall? And when I did, it changed the process for me. I was like, okay, I think it's done. It's speaking to me in a different way, and I like what it has to say. The message that it tells me is that the canvas itself represents the idea of the constrained idea of what society wants this figure to be. And the pattern on it is kind of chaotic. It doesn't really make sense. It's not anything definitive. It's kind of muddled. So the figure, I feel, is kind of wanting to get away from that notion. It's a book that doesn't want to be judged by its cover, and it's leaping out in its purest form, just this wire form that says, I am this. I'm this pure thing. I'm not what is put on me by society. So I really like this, the commentary, the statement that it makes. And this gets extended to this piece here, this idea of coming out of the canvas and rejecting the standards. So this piece is very personal in a way. Everything is deliberate about it, from the color of the canvas that's been removed to the cotton string that binds the figure to the stretcher. They're all very deliberate statements that are rejecting class, rejecting race, rejecting ethnicity, stripping a person down to its barest components so that the viewer can see that we're all the same, that we all have this nascent potential from which we can teach others and learn about the human condition and maybe offer insights. And everyone is on a level playing field in that regard. And I think this piece is saying that. It's like, don't look at what's on the canvas. Don't look at what I'm told to be. Rather, look at what I actually am. This was the one piece, of the four, this one was the most deliberate in its message. I had the idea, I knew how I wanted to execute it, and it just A, B, and C. And it rarely ever happens that way. Most of the time it's a very organic kind of process where I'm putting these elements together and they're speaking to me as they're coming together. So there's no real end goal until I get there. But in this piece there was an end goal, and I went straight to it without deviation. So that's kind of rare. So it must have been that the idea was a very solid one, and that it was hard to move away from that by changing how it's structured, or like with Out of My Skin, I hung it on the wall and it completely transformed it. With this one, there was no chance for that because the idea was really strong to begin with. I love this piece, but aesthetically it's not very, I don't know, it doesn't really pop. It just kind of hangs there. It almost looks like junk. And I like that because it takes away all of the pretense. It's just raw and bare, and that's all there is. And how the ideas come out of that, I think it's miraculous. So the next and last work is Untitled. The title of it is Untitled. It's deliberate because I didn't want to bias the viewer with a context. The more I look at this, the more it tells me something different. And I've since learned that the wall itself, as it's showing through the slits, are actually an important message in this piece. The cosmic imagery of the canvas itself as the interior tells me something when I contrast it with the wall as the exterior. So it's almost like this figure is living in a world that is artificial. It's created to be brilliant and wonderful, but the reality is it's a constraint. And when you strip away this illusion, you're left with this windows to the constraint itself. You can actually see what's holding you back, and the discovery is the despair. So I see a lot of despair in this piece, but some people see it as being joyful. They see a figure who is reveling in the majesty that's been created on this canvas, and they're almost swinging, like swinging on the curtains, just rejoicing in creativity. So depending on your mood, I guess this would speak to you in lots of different ways. But to follow the theme of the exhibit, I feel that this subject is tortured in this scene, that they're not happy, that they're tearing things down, or they're making some harsh discovery that's difficult to deal with. And I feel like the recent events have kind of done that in a way, because we have this these ideas that kind of set in the back of our mind and we don't face them, but the realities of those ideas come through, and if we don't face them, we're left with wondering what's going on. So at some point we do have to come to this realization that we, each of us, have an idea of class and our place in the world compared to others, and the value that that place puts on us as individuals in the eyes of others, and that this creates a lot of conflict, creates a lot of problems. And I hope that these 4 works kind of open a dialogue in that, in 4 unique ways. Riot pushing out of the mud and getting pushed back in, to out of my skin trying to escape the boringness, the chaos that they're conscribed, is that the word? Conscribed to? I think that's the word. And then rejected, who doesn't want to be a part of the system that makes them something that they're not, that they just want to be seen for who they are. And then the untitled, the figure who's tortured by the illusion that hides how constrained the figure is. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this exhibit, the Mudsill Exhibit, and if you're interested in any of these pieces, if they're available by the time you've watched this, contact me on social media, and I'd be more than happy to give you more information about those, or maybe offer a commission along the same lines. So thanks again for watching, and until next time, take care.